When Pastor Chuck came up with this concept of a series about mentorship and asked me to speak on who mentored me, I panicked because I had to really, really think about this and find those people. And there's only one name that came to my mind, and I'll tell you about him later. But before I tell you about him, I kind of need to tell you about who I was at the time. And we're going back, going way back to last century, 1990 something, even beyond. For me to find the guy I know who really mentored me. But have you guys ever seen the movie The Mask of Zorro? Because I was introduced to the phrase where Anthony Hopkins looks at, what's his name? Oh crap.
Alejandro.
Antonio Banderas, thank you. Anthony Hopkins looks at Antonio Banderas and he says, there's an ancient proverb that says, when the student is ready, the master appears. I think a lot of us are like, we have this fear of mentorship, or let's give it the churchy word, discipleship. Let's speak some Christianese today, because discipleship is what I'm talking about ultimately. We have a fear of discipleship, thinking, hey, who would want to disciple me? Who would want to speak into my life? And then on the flip side, who would want me to speak into their life? What have I got to offer? Questions. I see it resonating with a lot of us in this room. So let me tell you the story about little Michael Kelley. Like, who's that? Well, that was me. I was raised in a military family. My dad was in the Air Force. And he got promoted and transferred a lot. And when you're in the military family, when you're a military brat, we claim the word brat as our own. You ask any kid from a military family, say, yeah, I'm a military brat, because we could be bratty. And when you're a military brat, you learn things really, really young, quickly about relationships. One is you make them fast and quick. Because if you want a friend, if you want to do something, you got to go find the friends in the neighborhood and do whatever they're doing, or have them do whatever you're doing. And I made a lot of friends. I can make a friend, or I can make an acquaintance quickly. But then you also learn to hold on to those relationships loosely. Because at any moment, somebody's parent is going to be transferred, be shipped out, and you're going to be moving to another place, and somebody else is going to be moving into the house you're living in, and you're going to be moving into a house somebody else is living in. So I learned as a kid to hold on to relationships, make them quick, and hold them loose. Never really get fully intimate or close to anybody. When I was 8 years old, my parents got divorced. So suddenly, my dad proved to us what I've always really felt. He didn't want us. And he moved. These are perceptions of a little kid. By the way, these are not. So we moved to Hopkins, South Carolina, and my mom moved us into a trailer park. We lived in a mobile home. We lived in Laurel Hill Mobile Home Estates. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? We lived in the estates of mobile homes. And when you live in a mobile home estates, the same kind of concept happened, except you can know when your friends moved into town because they usually brought their house with them. And when they moved out, sometimes, most of the time, they took their house with them too, if it's worth moving. So you kind of knew when your neighborhood changed. My life was in a constant flux of change. People moving in, moving out. Whether I was in the military, and I still made friends quickly, held them loosely. Kind of difficult to understand a God that's going to be with you forever in that state of mind. Because nobody stays around forever. My mom dated lots of guys. Let's get to the point. Got to a point where one of her former boyfriends came into the house, and we hadn't seen him in a long time, and I had to go through the list of names to get to his. There was like 5 or 6 names that I had to cross off the list before I said, oh yeah, your name is Melvin. Okay, yes, my mom dated a guy named Melvin. But still, and those, being the son of a single mom, the men will either ignore you or try to win favor with you, make promises to you, and say, we're going to go fishing. I'm going to take you fishing. We didn't go fishing, but I was promised to go fishing. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I've had a lot of people make promises to me and try to fit in my life or try to fit them into my life. But they never stayed. Nobody seemed to care about little Michael Kelley. Middle school was tough. Middle school, I was a popular kid. Not popular because I had the right clothes, I had the right shoes, I was great, I looked good, I smelled good, I was great with everybody. But the opposite reason. I was the popular pick on. I was the kid they beat up. I was the kid they harassed. I was the kid they made cry. And I could cry at the drop of a hat because I was emotionally unstable. Over the years, I heard about this Jesus guy. We went to church. My mom dragged us to church once a month just so we get our quota in, just so she made peace with her mom or her family. And over the years, I went to vacation Bible schools, I went to camps, and I went to all these places, and I heard many times the stories of what's written in this word. The stories of Noah, the stories of Moses, and I was introduced to the top highlights because I didn't go to church every week. It got to the point where I didn't want to go to church because I knew I just didn't want to deal with it. But the summer after middle school, before 9th grade, I went to church camp and I heard the preacher yelling about Jesus. He was Frank Shivers, a friend of my mom's, and a guy my mom actually dated when she was in high school. And Frank had this way, we were at a camp, he had this camp out in the middle of the woods, there was a lake, and he preached, and when he preached, he got loud, his body would turn red, his face would turn red and get so into it, and he'd be like loud, one of those preachers you can imagine at a camp meeting who has to get his voice to the other side of the country. And he's passionate about Jesus. And something clicked that maybe I should go forward and pray this prayer and say this prayer and do something. So I went forward and I said a prayer with somebody. 2 months later, and then I got home, I told my mom. Mom dragged me down to the end of the church, the altar area where and said, you're going to join the church, you're going to tell people what's happened. I got baptized 2 months later, and a few months after that, I had joined the youth group and started going to church to find out more about this Jesus thing. And I heard a woman tell a testimony, and her experience mirrored mine, and something in my heart said, Harry, you missed something somewhere. And I remember sitting on the front row of the church, where nobody sits on the front row of the church. Except for these two people who keep me. But nobody sits in the front row of the church. And I'm sitting there, the only person beside me was the music minister. That's where it was, And he was doing his notes, getting ready to go up front. And I'm like, and God was like, Mike, you missed me. And I prayed to God, I said, God, I missed something somewhere. If it's you, I need you right now. I became a Christian at that moment. And I followed, and suddenly, you couldn't get me out of church. I was there every time the door opened. Every Wednesday, every Tuesday. If there was a Thursday Bible study, I went to that. Sunday, I was there in the morning, and then I heard there was choir, youth choir. I joined the youth choir. I can't sing worth a lick, but I joined the youth choir. Then there was discipleship training. And I was like, you couldn't get me out of church. I wanted to know everything I could about this Jesus guy. I wanted to know everything you were going to teach me about this Bible thing. And the stuff that falls out of it. I wanted to know. Did it make me a more popular kid? No, because I still felt like an outcast. In my own youth group, I felt like an outcast. Where people were supposed to be accepted, I still felt like the outsider trying to sneak in and look in. My freshman and sophomore year, it was like that. I made more friends. I still held on to them loosely. Because I still had that, what do they want to do with me? Junior year of high school, this crazy, weird guy entered my life. There was a guy named, his name was Roy Engel. You will never know that name from Adam, from anybody else. But he's the guy that changed a lot of my views, a lot of the ways I saw the Word of God. A lot of the ways I saw Jesus. A lot of the ways I saw what it meant to be a follower of Christ. Roy was completely different than me. He was a baseball player. He was a jock. I was in the drama club. He was athletic. He played baseball with a member of the 2004 Boston Red Sox World Series baseball team. Pokey Reese, first base. Pokey Reese went to my high school. And Roy played baseball with him. That was my claim to fame. And Roy became a Christian 2 years after I did. 2 years after I did. He was in Assemblies of God. I'm a Southern Baptist. Still completely different. Roy would stand up but the thing about Roy is he grabbed onto Jesus. Jesus didn't just grab onto him, he grabbed onto Jesus. And so and he pursued, and he got close, and he got into it. Him and this guy named Jack, they would sit around our table, and they would just talk and share the gospel with each other and share ideas. And Roy would be one of these guys that would stand up on the table and say, "You down with G-O-D? Yeah, you know me." He was weird. But he was the kind of weird that drew people to him. And everybody's like, "Wow, what's up with this guy? We like he's different, he's bold, he's in our faith, he's ready to do things." More so than anybody at my little Southern Baptist church was doing. And my Southern Baptist, my church was teaching me things, and I was learning things there, but there was something about Roy. I got caught in his wake. I followed him. I was with him. I connected with him. And believe it or not, he let me tag along. This geek, and not the good word geek like we've changed it today, but I was a geek, I was a dork, I was a nerd, but I wasn't a smart, geeky, dorky nerd. I was just the guy that was freaky and out of place and didn't belong. Roy was the cool jock that everybody liked, and he brought me with him. With Roy, we went to places. My relationship with Roy went through when I went to college. He's still connected. He would go, be invited to go speak at places, and he'd say, "Here, you're coming with me." Notice I changed the name from Michael Kelley, because there was a day that we were sitting at our tables, and Roy and Jack looked at me one day and they said, "Mike, you've got a lot of hair. We're just going to call you Hair." Didn't know that was a day that was going to change my life. Because I was tired, because I was the kid that nobody really wanted to call him by his real name. They gave me nicknames, and not all of them were edifying. Matter of fact, none of them were edifying until Roy just said Hair. I don't know if that's like, I was like, I don't know if that's going to stick or not. Until, I'll tell you this, why it stuck is because they called me Hair. Pretty much everybody at our table called me Hair. Our little Christian club started calling me Hair. And then I moved on. I was literally sitting in our yearbook class, and somebody was right behind me, about right there, saying, "Mike, Michael, hey Mike, I heard a voice behind me. I heard a voice behind me." I didn't know who she was talking to. Until she goes, "Hair." I go, "Yes, that's me. What can I do for you?" Changed my life because of a crazy baseball player who fell in love with Jesus, who was at Assemblies of God. Two people who should never have been friends, should never have met in the high school hierarchy, who should never have been together. Roy introduced me to things like Keith Green and Leonard Ravenhill. And he introduced me to Luke chapter 14, verses 26. And that's where we're going to go. Because he had this whole concept of, he introduced me to the concept that this Christian life isn't just about going to church on Sundays. It's not just about being at Bible studies, but it's being every aspect of your life filled and complete. And every aspect, there's a no compromise nature in our Christianity that my church wasn't telling me about. My youth minister wasn't talking about. That there was more of a commitment needed than just going to church and saying a prayer. When all I heard from everybody else was, it's about a prayer. You got to say the right words. You got to put the words together. And I prayed that prayer 100 times. One time I prayed with I got all the nouns in. I was like, that's good enough, right? It's not, and Roy was teaching me, it's not the magical words of a prayer that get you saved. But there's more to it. Let's read Luke 14:25 through 35 is what I'm going to go for. He says, "Now large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and said to them, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, Which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if it has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all who observe it will begin to ridicule him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000? Or else, while the ruler is far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So then, none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. Therefore, salt is good, but if even salt has become tasteless, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for the soil or the manure pile. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. No compromise. What is it going to take? What does it take to follow God? We hear the strong word in there, hate, right? There's a big, you can't hate your mother, you can't hate your brother. I have no problems with, I had no problems at the time with the phrase, I have to hate my sister. I can handle that. But the rest of it, that hate's a strong word. Hate's not in the Bible. It says it right there. But there's a better understanding of this. You can't. It's not that you hate them. It's that you love your Jesus more than anything else. Putting Christ first above everything else. Above your family, above your friends, above your own life. That's what we're called for. All that other stuff we do, we love our families, we love our wives, our brothers, our sisters, our husbands, because Christ told us to. But ultimately, you're still putting Christ first. He's also putting, it says, and then jump down to 33, it says, none of you can be my disciples if you do not give up everything you have. So God, are you telling me to be poor and homeless because I got to give up everything to follow you? He goes, no. But you got to acknowledge that it's not yours, it's mine. Started doing some, I love the Jewish Bible that because it brings up words. And you start looking at the words, and then you got to research the word. And then you got to research what does that word mean in Jewish times. And the word for disciple is the word Talmud. Talmudim is the plural. Talmudim. A plural, and this is what it means, a plural Hebrew noun meaning disciples. In its truest sense, those who leave family to study and follow the ways of their teacher. The study is not only to learn what the teachers know, but to become the type of man their teacher is. It's a deep relationship between the Talmudim and the rabbi. The Talmudim leaves everything they own, and they follow the rabbi everywhere he goes. Their job is not just to be to learn what he does, but to learn how he does it and do it the way he does it. Their goal is to be just like their rabbi. Some things that I picked up reading from different places. Take a moment and think about the education system of the Jewish kids. There are 3 steps in the religious education of the Jewish kids. Jewish children, Hebrew children. The first step is the Bet Sefer. For Jews, it's the Bet Sefer, S-E-F-E-R. I don't know how to pronounce it. There wasn't a pronunciation key on the website. So at the ages of 6 through 12, Jewish children begin their formal education. Both boys and girls attend synagogue and learn to read and write. The textbook was the Torah, first 5 books of the Old Testament, the law. And the goal was not just to read, but to memorize. So between 6 and 12, they're in school learning law, memorizing. This is what I found interesting. As a child of 6, you would go into the synagogue, and the most respected man in the city would greet you with a slate that he would put a dollop of honey on the slate. And then he would remove the ancient scroll of the Torah. As you sat speechless and in awe, the rabbi would have you taste the honey on your slate and tell you that the Torah is sweeter than honey. Teaching the law that it's sweet. We hear about the law today. What do we think? The law of God is harsh. It's confining. And then he says, no, just imagine if we think of it as sweet. Then the next step is the Bet Midrash. For the next educational opportunity from ages 13 to 15 who were deemed worthy to continue their education. They went on to study and memorize the entire Tanakh. The Tanakh is the rest of the Bible, the Old Testament. Not just the law, but the teachings, the prophets, the writings, the Psalms. Memorize, as well as learning the family trade. Very few were selected for this pursuit. And finally, there's the Bet Talmud. Of those who finished the Bet Midrash, again, only the best of the best were able to pursue the final education leg. This was the longest in duration. It went from the age of 15 to 30. To participate in, he must be invited by a rabbi, and if selected, he would begin the process of grooming that would lead to the potential of becoming a rabbi at 30. Those who were chosen were referred to as the Talmidim. They would literally follow in the dust of their rabbi, desiring to emulate him in his mannerisms. They would eat the same food in exactly the same way. They would go to sleep, awake the same way as their rabbi. And more importantly, they would learn to study the Torah and understand God exactly the same way as their rabbi. They would follow in the dust. When you're walking down a dusty road, you kick up a lot of dust behind you. I don't know if you know that. If you ever look back when you do that, you see a car driving down the road, it's kicking up all that dust behind them. That is what they mean. The rabbi would be walking in the dust, and the dust of the rabbi would fall on the Talmudim's feet. We read the story of the Bible, we read the story of Jesus when he called his disciples, and he says, come, follow me. He picked tax collectors, he picked fishermen, he picked zealots, he picked guys sitting under fig trees. He picked all these people that they weren't deemed to be ready for other rabbis, but God called them up. And did we think they were uneducated men? When you think they've already had the law of God memorized, if they made it past the first step. They may even have the entire Bible memorized, because they made it past the second step. They knew the Word of God. They knew the Bible. And God picked these stragglers, this ragamuffin, ragtag group of people, and they followed in the dust of Jesus. They followed after every place that Jesus went. As an interesting story concept of one of the stories I read, being like the rabbi is the major focus of the life of a Talmudim. They listen and question. They respond when questioned. They follow without knowing where the rabbi is taking them, and knowing that the rabbi has good reason for bringing them to the right place for his teaching. to make the most sense. The story of Matthew 16, Jesus walked nearly 30 miles one way to be in Caesarea Philippi for a lesson that fit the location perfectly. Surely he talked with them along the way, but the whole trip seems to have been geared for one lesson that takes less than 10 minutes. Following after Christ, being a Talmudim of our Rabbi Yeshua, means we go places where we don't understand where we're going. We don't know why we're getting there. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know how long this trip is going to take. And when we get there, it'll be like, God has a 5-minute lesson for you. And then all of a sudden I said, now go back. You mean you brought me all the way here just for this? And you know what Jesus is saying? Yes. To learn something? No compromise, no falling back, no moving forward. Once you've committed to be a Talmudim, a disciple of Christ, you follow after this Christ until you get it. And for the rest of your life, we're following after Christ. We are disciples. We come into Christ. Yes, He's our Savior, but He says, I want you to follow after me. Leave the rest of your crap behind and come follow after me. Leave everything else behind and follow after me. And it's only when they became aged enough, when they hit their 30s, are they able to, was a Talmudim ready to be a rabbi? He says, go teach what I have told you. We read in the letters of Paul where he says, imitate me as I am imitating Christ. Discipleship is not as difficult as we think it's going to be. We hear the word discipleship, we start thinking, oh Christ, what books do I need to read? What books do I need to bring? What material, what curriculum do I need to give these people in order to teach them? We try to find the mass market discipleship in the church today, right? We try to figure out how many of these people can I teach at one time? Get them all crammed in a room and let's go. And then I only have to see them once a week. That's not the way Jesus did it. That's not the way the rabbis did it. That's not the way John the Baptist did it. That's not the way the Pharisees even did it. They said, you follow after me. You walk in my dust. That's not the way Roy did it. Roy dragged me everywhere. Roy dragged me to a place in Boone, North Carolina, because he was speaking somewhere, and he says, Harry, you're going with me. And I'm like, okay. Roy dragged me into some semi-heretic churches because, we thought that's where we needed to go. I went with him. And later I found out they were a little bit too cult-like. But I went with Roy because he spoke into me and he cared about me. And he showed me things. And Roy meant what he did. See, I told you he played baseball, but I remember the story one day, there was this coach called him into his office. And he said, Roy, there's this church thing is interfering with your baseball. So you gotta pick one. And Roy looked at him and goes, well, it's been nice playing with you. And quit the team. It taught me something. Just that event taught me something. And sometimes there are things we put in place in Christ that compete for our will relationship, or compete for our commitment to Christ. What goes away? Give you a hint, it's not the thing, it's not Christ. It shouldn't be Christ. If we are truly willing and wanting to be disciples and disciple makers. We've got to hate everything else in comparison. We've got to put Christ first and then love the things that he tells us to love. Teach the things he's teaching us. Give up everything we have. Follow him. I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're walking in the dust of our rabbi. I don't know if anybody's speaking into your life, but they should be. It's difficult to overcome social barriers. It's difficult to overcome the what have I got? The who am I? The who wants to learn from me or who wants to teach me. Oddly enough, those people who are asking who wants to learn from me and the other people who are saying who wants to teach me, they're in the same room. Are you walking in the dust of a rabbi? Are you fully committed to this Christ thing? Maybe this whole lesson has taught you a little bit about me, if nothing else, why I'm here at the church every day. Not because y'all are paying me to be here. Why do I get upset when people don't come to church on Sunday mornings or don't want to be here? It's because maybe that teaches you, tells you a little bit about it. Because that's the way we're supposed to be. We're supposed to find every opportunity we have to be together and follow Christ. Do you need to come to church to be a Christian? No. But you should be in church if you are a Christian. Where are you at? Have you even made the steps? The first step. Well, that first step is easy. Just say, God, I want to follow you. My prayer doesn't have to be a fancy prayer. My prayer was, God, I missed you somewhere. Where are you? I need you now. And then have you made the decision to follow him? Have you heard it call you and say, follow me? And you said, okay, I'm leaving my books. I'm leaving my nets. I'm leaving my dad in the boat. I love the story of John and James. They left their dad sitting in the boat because Jesus said, follow me. I was like, let's go. Matthew left his books and tax collector notes and said, I'll follow you. Where are you on the journey? What steps do you need to make and take to go deeper? Step forward. It's easy. Discipleship ain't as hard as it sounds, but it ain't as easy as it sounds either. My challenge for you is to make steps. Become a Talmudim of Yeshua, a disciple of Jesus Christ. Let's pray. Father God, I love you. I don't always do everything I should, but I love you. Thank you for taking this misfit, out of place freak and leading him to people who cared, who spoke in, who saw what they wanted to be, what I could be. Thank you for Roy. God, I ask that you bless him wherever he is right now. And keep him and his family safe and whole. And God, I lift up to you the folks in this church, that we may take this call of discipleship and follow you and walk in your dust. In Jesus' name, amen.